Award-winning Korean director Bong Joon-ho's latest hit movie, Mickey 17, and occult K-animation film Exorcism Chronicles, The Beginning, have something in common. Both have led to an increased interest in the original novels they are based on. Today, we want to take a closer look at this trend and the two movies in more detail with Jae Soh, professor and filmmaker at Seoul Institute of the Arts. Hello, Professor Soh.
Hello,
nice
Professor.
To be back. Good to see you.
So, Professor Soh, it's been now exactly a month since Mickey 17 has been released here in Korea and around 3 weeks elsewhere. I think around 2.9 million viewers have watched it domestically, and I've been really eager to ask you this question. How was the movie?
I think the movie's really great. It's unusual, quirky, everything a Bong Joon-ho film has. So, you know, it creates like a new world, a dystopian world. And I think what I found really interesting is that it has all these Western actors now in it, except for Steven Yeun. So you have like an American film basically made by Warner Brothers by a Korean director. So, you know, you delve into this world where it's kind of like sort of a dystopian future. You have creatures like in Okja and The Host. So you have his world in this kind of movie, which I think is just really unusual. And I think for a while, Warner Brothers had a hard time trying to release it because they didn't know how to market the movie. But I think, you know, something that Bong Joon-ho said, which was something about how the most personal is the most creative. So, you know, it's based on a novel, but he has really made it his own kind of genre in itself. And so it blends everything from science fiction to satire to sort of, you know, social commentary, things like that. And then I just really like the characters. Robert Pattinson, you know, basically, I don't want to give spoilers, but he's really interesting because he's a clone. You could see that in the trailer, but his acting is something I haven't seen in a long time. So he's able to bring out sort of like really great things. Toni Collette, you know, all these great actors in the movie just really kind of shine.
Well, I myself, I really liked the movie as well. And I have to say, you mentioned that Director Bong Joon-ho's other movies, like the elements are seen there. And I also thought that I could see parts of kind of elements of Snowpiercer and also Parasite. It was a Bong Joon-ho. And I also really liked it that I could ponder upon moral issues after watching it. Now, Bella is also getting ready to watch it, I heard, right? And I guess you're going to contribute to maybe reaching 3 million viewers.
Very
because
soon,
we're
right?
at 2.9 million right now. But Professor Soh, in Korea, Mickey 17 has also spurred the interest into the book, which is Mickey 7, not 17, with over 100,000 copies having been sold. Now, there are some distinct differences, though, between the book and the movie. So let's talk about that. I mean, the obvious one is that Mickey seems to be dying more often in the movie.
Yes, the title, 17 is the movie, so he dies 10 times more. But a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually Bong Joon. Before the book was even published, he saw the unfinished manuscript of Mickey 7 and sort of fell in love with it and then sort of made it. And as you pointed out, the movie has, you know, distinct differences. You know, there isn't a, you know, I think there's a sort of a dictator character. There's no wife character played by Toni Collette. Also, the main character, Robert Pattinson, in the movies is a little bit dim, like sort of a working man type of thing. In the novel, he's a historian and an intellectual, but it still takes sort of the basic storyline of the thing. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Bong Joon-ho is a very interesting, quirky director, so he kind of put his spin on it. So I think, in a way, it creates an interesting contrast because it's about the same story, but you know, you kind of see Bong Joon-ho's take on it. And so if you read the novel, you see major differences in terms of characters and the way the story is going. But I think Bong Joon-ho's story is just so visual. You're watching a movie, so, you know, like the creature is just described as a creature, but in the movie, you know, it's really distinct. So there are elements of things in novels that you can kind of imagine, and then there are movies that come out that kind of like take your imagination into a direction that maybe you might have not even thought of. Yeah.
Right. And I think audiences like that too, you know, having that little twist from the novel to the film product. And Mickey 17 is loved by so many fans, you know, not only science fiction fans or the fans of original works, but by basically everyone who watched the film. Why do you think Mickey 17 appealed to such a wide variety of audiences?
Well, I think first of all, like it's kind of a niche story in terms of it being in a science fiction sort of universe, but at the same time, you know, like the elements of Parasite, it's still about sort of a small family, you know, of basically it's a couple that's kind of established in the movie, but you kind of go into this story starting with the main character's sort of narration about himself, which is in first person. So it goes back to sort of like old film noir movies in the past where it's like a detective movie where the guy's going, you know, how did I get into this? You know, that type of thing. So there's a lot to explain in this movie, but just a simple thing about cloning and things like that. So, but I love all the details about things like, you know, I don't want to give up too much stuff, but it's in the trailer, so I'm going to mention it, that the human body is cloned in this movie. And it, like a bad Xerox machine, it kind of gets stuck sometimes. So those are like little elements that I guess you can't really imagine in a novel, but in the movie, those things kind of, I was like laughing a lot in the theater. I don't think a lot of audiences thought it was funny, maybe afterwards, but I just found it to be so interesting and also quirky. So.
Those little details are really what gets the audiences.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now I want to talk about another movie. It's Exorcism Chronicles: The Beginning, or 퇴마록, which, you know, has been one of the most successful animation film lately. Both ticket sales and the book sales are doing great. What do you think, you know, is what's behind this popularity?
So introducing the Exorcism Chronicles, basically it's by a writer named Lee Woo-yeok, who basically it was serialized as a bunch of novels that came out from 1993 to 2001, and it sold over 10 million copies. So it was something that I think a generation before really kind of took to. So it's even before webtoons, really. So this serialized novel was something that people really got into. And the story's about you know, basically an exorcism thing, which, you know, with now Exuma coming out, which is like a huge movie, it combined basically sort of Christian sort of elements with shamanism. So it's like the first sort of stories that really did that. And it's about like the main character is an exorcism expert who basically fights evil spirits. And he comes from a long lineage of sort of people that do exorcism, has supernatural powers, things like that. So it's something that was serialized. People really, you know, wanted to read the next novel when it came out. So finally, the people behind the powers that made it decided to do an animation version of it. I kind of wanted to see a live action version, but I think there's too many fantastical elements, so I thought, you know, it was a good sort of choice, creative choice to do it in an animation form. So you're able to sort of do special effects and wild things, and I think the animation style itself is really unusual. It's basically almost like 3D and 2D sort of combined together. So it has this kind of very good texture in the movie. And so I think it's about time it came out, and I'm really glad that they made the first one. It's actually a prequel, so there are many, perhaps, sequels to come.
That actually brings us to our next question. I mean, people might be waiting already for season 2. And as you said, Professor Soh, it was about time that this came out as a movie, as the book, the novel, was published 3 decades ago. But how has it been adapted to modern times, do you think? And also, as you just mentioned, you would have liked also to see a live action movie. So maybe we could see this being adapted into, I don't know, a Netflix series with real actors and actresses?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that it came out as a feature-length animation film, as a standalone. But I think they wanted to do it kind of low budget. So the budget is not, it's slightly over $1 million. So the box office sales actually has surpassed that. So they made their money back. It's not a huge hit, but I think it's something that I think a lot of people are starting to sort of catch on to. It's like a generation ago, right? Because it's basically 30 years ago when it came out. But there are people, I guess, people that were in their teenage years, now in their 40s and 50s, that like basically stood in line. When I went to see it in the theater, it was almost like kind of older generation people standing in line waiting to see it. So I think they were also very excited that it was in animation form and not in a live action, because I think there's a way, if you have live action, sometimes the star power behind something might not really gel with what the sort of the audiences want. But their universe of what this Exorcism Chronicles is really particular, and it has shamanistic elements. So I think the animation really kind of allowed for sort of creative things to come out like that, a lot of special effects that came out. And I think it works in today, like 2025. It's a perfect kind of style to do. So I think it was very successful. And so far there isn't like an announcement about the sequels, but I hope they make more. Yeah.
Now, Professor Soh, you just mentioned it's the grown-ups that have been standing in line. Bella and I have been talking about this. The movie is actually, you can watch it 12 years and up, but it's because of those people who read the books 3 decades ago, why it is called.
And then they were 12
adult.
actually when they read it.
Exactly, right. Oh, exactly.
Yeah, you're not supposed to read that. It was kind of more adult-based, but at the time when it came out, I remember a lot of sort of middle school kids were reading it, as well as high school kids. So.
Okay, that's
why it's more like
and now
adults,
they're kind of older, right?
Yeah. And I do want to ask your thoughts on, the impact resulting from the consumption of content, that share the same universe, the book and the film, as well as, I want to hear the positive impact of the successful ticket sales at theaters on bookstore as well, because we're talking about, 2 films that, novels turned into films. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, the history of cinema itself, it starts out with I think the first adaptation of a sort of a story or a novel is a movie called Cinderella that came out in 1899. So as long as movie history has been, there's always been sort of a link to literature, and now it's, webtoons and other sort of media, but we've had a long history of that. And right now, I think that universe sharing, the fandom that's in it, so I think it's called digging consumption is the word that they use now. And it's basically before it'd be just a few sort of people that are really into it, that are into that fandom. But now this kind of sort of niche fandom has now become more mainstream, and people are really taking to it. So, for example, like Hunger Games would be a series that in the West that, people were really avid about it as a novel. And then when Jennifer Lawrence came out with sort of the live action version, people were excited to see that. So in Korea, we have a similar thing with maybe the movie Along with the Gods, 신과 함께. So that's also based on a sort of a webtoon, but at the same time, there's a fan base for that kind of universe, and you can share it with movies as well. Yeah.
Now, last but not least, Professor Soh, very briefly, are there any other movies that we can look out for this year that are based on other existing stories?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, everybody's going towards, like series on Netflix and things like that. But I think what everybody's looking forward to is Park Chan-wook's new film, which is actually based on a novel. The Korean title is No Other Choice. But at the same time, it's based on a novel by Donald Westlake called The Axe, which was already made into a movie in the early 2000s by Costa Gavras, another great filmmaker. And this movie has Lee Byung-hun and Son Ye-jin. And it's basically kind of a horror thriller movie, but now with Park Chan-wook in the director's chair, I think it's going to be also humorous, quirky, sort of like in Bong Joon-ho's vein, but definitely like the old boy director's style. So it's sort of the story about somebody that loses his job and is job hunting, but kind of in a violent way. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. Yeah.
So much to watch in the rest of the year, and also so much to read, because people like to also go back to the original stories. Well, thank you very much, Professor Soh, for your insights today, and have a great weekend.
Thank you,
My
Professor.
pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, Bella, as always. Have a great weekend yourself, and see you next week.
Yes, I'll see you next week.